Welcome to Tennis Spin, where we put our spin on your tennis. Today, have you ever had an injury on your wrist? We're going to talk about wrist injuries today because, according to my buddy Craig Willard, nobody does. Stay tuned. A fan named Craig Willard reached out to me about his teenage daughter who is going through some wrist issues right now. Wrist issues are an interesting thing. It's a tough one for tennis players. It's usually on the bottom side, which is the most common, right? And then the upper side, which is a little less common. But if you've ever hit a late forehand, usually it hurts right there. And it hurts for a while depending on the extremity of, how much you tried to fight off that forehand, or how tight you strung that poly, or if you kept playing with your injury. I've had that injury before myself, and it lasted 2 to 3 months. I pretty much was out of commission for those 2 to 3 months. I know that a lot of you have always wanted to, keep going with the injury. I've spoken to the doc, and they usually say rest. Now, I'm going to go to each of the coaches and ask them if they've ever had a wrist injury and how they had to deal with it. All right, stay tuned. So, Coach Alicia, I understand that you've been suffering from some wrist injuries too. Does yours is here?
Yes, mine is right outside the outer bone, both wrists.
Both wrists?
Yeah.
Okay, now how did this occur? What's the cause?
I think growing up, I did badminton, and that really screwed up a lot of my wrist. And then also, as you grow older, the more wrist movement you do in tennis, like your forehand spin or whatnot, there's a really thin ligament inside where the more you rub against it, the more it'll get thinner and thinner. Ooh. So then mine is basically like pretty much gone. So that's how I got mine. So now it still hurts time to time when I hit a forehand too.
You saw a doctor for this, obviously.
Yeah, I did see a doctor and physiotherapist for it.
What did they have you do?
They have me do all these like wrist movements with a dumbbell, like a really light dumbbell, and then I went to like Chinese doctors for acupuncture, so they released tension on my forearm. Mm-hmm. And then when I got to college, my trainer would scrape me out here and then below here as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because sometimes it is here that gets too tight, and then it will be tight around your outer wrist.
Interesting. Yeah. So when you first had the injury, how long did it last?
I had this injury for as long as I remember. So it never really got away until I just started taping every time I play tennis. And then back in the days, I had like really bad tan lines because of the tapes. So it was like, I just had to tape it up. It really wouldn't go away because it's really your forearm being too tight, and then it will linger all the way down to your wrist.
I see. Yeah. So taping it doesn't really immobilize it. You still get movement from it, though, right? It's just a little bit of insurance.
It's like a little bit of like, the KT tape mindset where you think it's protecting your wrist. But no, I think the white rigid tapes that you tape on it will definitely help you because it really doesn't allow you to go that much backwards and forwards. It really has to, you really have to swing it through. So
doesn't that impede movement in your forehand?
Not really, because a lot of people, their forehand goes like weak and goes like this,
too
and
much.
that will really hurt your wrist. But with the white tape, it really holds your wrist like this, then you can't really do much.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what we've learned is it can come from here into the elbow because this is all kind of connected. So maybe release this, and then it will release this part so it doesn't pull so hard. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alicia, for
Mm-hmm.
sharing your injury with us. I think the person that I'm trying to help out is about your size and about your height. So hopefully we helped you with another person that's just like you. Off to the next coach. All right, we got Coach Chris here today, or should I say, Dr. Chris. I had a fan message me about his child having a wrist problem, and it's down here like most common wrist issues that do flare up. Have you had a wrist problem before or wrist injury?
Yeah, I've had definitely a wrist problem before. Never serious, inflamed, but never debilitating.
Okay. Yeah. Was it from tennis?
Yeah, let's say it's from tennis.
Do you think it was from a forehand or a backhand?
Don't remember. Probably more forehand if I were to think about it.
Probably took a forehand late? Took a bunch of forehands late? Or framed one off the thing?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing for having a wrist injury is the technique that your kid is doing. So really take a look at what part of contact. If she's out behind him, if she's out in front, is she late? Meaning, like, is the ball low? Is the ball high? Once you figure out those parameters, and then take a look at what kind of biomechanics she's applying to her wrist. A lot of tendencies for your wrist to get injured is you actually don't have a firm wrist. You just
floppy.
Yeah, like what he said. Floppy. So when you're hitting your forehand or you're hitting a backhand, you have to start to be a little bit more in control of your body mechanic versus letting the ball break your wrist back or break your wrist left or right. That's what I've noticed in a lot of young kids is that they just play too much with the wrist, and they need a little bit more stability. So that should be corrected.
So I call that slappiness. So you see a lot of people like with a loose everything, and then they kind of just slap, like slap at the ball. Yeah. I mean, that's one way to keep everything loose, though.
Yeah.
So you're saying that they should firm up, like here at impact, take it obviously on as early as possible, right? So that it doesn't impact the wrist so harshly.
Yep. The biggest thing is that I would say that when you're hitting your shots, right, my wrist never points towards the net. My actually palm is the one that faces towards the net. So my fingertips are my palm. The palm faces the net. So my wrist locks back before I swing. Think about that for your kid next time if she's feeling any wrist issues. If she's feeling wrist issues now, I'd say rest so that way she's feeling 100%. And then try a few more forehands where she's got her palm facing you versus her whole fingertips facing you.
Do you think she went from a hybrid to a full bed of confidential? Do you think the full bed of Polly had anything to do with it?
How old is she?
16.
How tall?
5'6", 5'7", about 125 pounds.
No, I wouldn't say too much. I would say that would be a good time to switch to Polly. She's at the age where she can probably handle it. Growing up, I'm not sure. I think she just had those habits, and it's time to kind of correct those. Technically, I would say look at the technique first before the strings.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's kind of like what I said too. I said stick with the poly as long as you can. Go with the thinner gauge of it, just to relieve a little bit of the stress versus the 16 gauge in it. Go with the 17 gauge.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Chris, and good luck to you. We're gonna move on to the next coach to see what other tips they can give.
Keep us posted.
Yep. Coach Chris, where can they find you?
You can find me at CB Chin Tennis.
And
that's
it. All right. Off to the next coach. All right, so Coach Gu, have you ever had a wrist injury?
Well, yeah, I have. Most of my left and my right. So I had it both hands. Mostly on my right because, dominant hand and my forehand. That's very common injuries because of overusage.
Top or bottom?
I had it in both.
Really?
I had it in both.
During the same time or in different times?
Different times. Not at the same time. If it was the same time, we would have a lot of issues at that point. I don't think I'll be playing tennis still.
Okay. So let's talk about the one on the bottom. What happened?
I believe, if I recall correctly, I suffered partially from tennis elbow and a wrist injury. That was actually due to my bottom. What I realized through that injury was overusage. I mean, a lot of tennis players do overuse their forearms and their wrists because they're all connected, especially on impact. So that's something, it's very common. I wouldn't say it's not common at all. It's very, very common. What I find beneficial is actually massaging and around the forearm area, because what I realized when I was playing tennis, like I had tennis elbow, and then you probably had this moment where you're like, okay, it's gone. Like a few days, it's gone. And then all of a sudden it's like a new pain occurs. So what you do is you find the pain source. So what I realized was, for me, a tennis elbow, it actually affected from my bottom wrist here, and then it goes all the way actually to my forearm. So when you touch around your forearm, you're actually very tense. So if your pain is in your forearm, right, for example, or your elbow, naturally it has to lead to somewhere else. So your other muscle body or your also muscle groups will be working. So let's say your forearm was hurting, you'll probably be like, hey, let me just use my wrist to compromise for this for a few days.
Yes.
Compensate for a few times, right? And then all of a sudden your wrist hurts. You're like, holy crap, my wrist hurts. Well, you're probably using a different muscle group that you weren't expecting to use because of your forearm, because you're trying to save it. So that could be what happens when you have wrist injuries, because first because of a little bit of tennis and then tennis elbow, and then it kind of lingers all the way down. Or another issue would be just you're having a wrist injury. That's normal. But I would always suggest people to do is just find a tightness in the forearm area, like from basically where your wrist starts to your forearm areas, because that's where you kind of build your muscle groups, right? That's where kind of like most people feel tension is in the forearm, right? Because that's where you hit and make contact on the ball. It absorbs in the forearm.
Right. Yeah, I can feel it right here, actually.
Yeah, so you'll feel certain parts of your forearm being tense, and what you'll do is try to ice that area and kind of Theragun or use a lacrosse ball, or a tennis ball to roll it, right? And then the next step would be trying to do exercises that require less with the wrist, but working other muscle groups of your forearm or your arm, because to strengthen it, right? There's a reason why your wrist is probably hurt as well. Maybe it's just due to lack of muscle groups, of strength of muscle groups, so therefore you need to work on certain areas. So doing certain exercises, like for me, when I was injured, I did a lot of more forearm work. So like I would be on like pretend like there was a bench here or like a little table. I'll grab like a tennis ball and just do like kind of wrist working on my forearm to lift the ball up, down, going right, going left. Just trying to rotate when it feels a little better, just to get muscle groups growing, right? So you're just developing more.
The micro muscles.
The micro muscles, of course, yeah. So that's how I got rid of my pain. Is it a slow process? Yeah, it depends on how bad and how severe it is. I think for a tennis elbow and that wrist injury, it was almost around.
It's usually like 4 minimum.
4 to 5 months.
Weeks.
I mean,
months.
Like mine was a month, like at least 2 to 3 months, because I mean, I was at a growing point of puberty.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, so like your body's still trying to adjust, and it's like catching up, and you're all tense. So that's actually where you're most prone to injury when you hit puberty, especially as a junior player.
Right.
That actually hurts a lot. So.
Did you see a doctor?
Yeah, I see a doctor. But I would say if you can figure out how to diagnose it or just kind of like work around it, you don't need to. But I would say always go to a doctor to make sure everything's okay.
You ever see the Chinese herbalist?
Yeah, I saw a Chinese herbalist too.
The one that makes you cry?
And the one that gives me bad medicine.
The one that like just massages you so hard that you start tearing up and go, ooh, it hurts so much.
That's probably you, dude. I don't know. You like that stuff. But no, I've seen doctors. I've seen also like physical therapists as well. I mean, going to a physical therapist does really help because you can see they can actually help you diagnose it as well too.
That's true.
So I would highly
help you
recommend
strengthen
that.
what needs to be strengthened.
Yeah, and they'll basically give you like a routine. So basically a plan, like a rehab plan, and also a strengthening plan to help you recover through that wrist injury.
Got it. All right, perfect. Well, thank you for sharing your wrist injury. Where can they find you, Gu?
You can find me at agu.tennis. I'll also be posting content there as well.
All right. Off to the next coach. All right, so question for Coach Jerod now. You've had wrist issues before, right? Because I think in some videos we've shared with people. What happened to you?
So I was playing a lot of tennis towards the end of last year. Probably wasn't icing and wasn't resting as much as I probably should have. And, you know, I had a lot of wrist pain while I was playing matches and just, you know, pumped as much Advil as possible. That's, you know, healthy enough where you don't have an overdose, and did that. And one day I kind of got off of it and tried hitting some balls, and flames all up on the wrist, and I was diagnosed with de Quervain's tendinopathy. I was out for roughly 8 weeks. So that was towards the end of last year.
Wow. Now, was your injury above or below?
I think it was above.
Yours is above.
Yeah, and it's actually funny. I also had an injury in college, which is also in the same spot. It was more of a, I think it was a ganglion cyst. So this right wrist has kind of had some history of injuries, which is not the greatest thing, but you know, I'm happy to be over it and through it. So yeah,
I got it. So how did we make it well again?
Traditionally, I mean, everyone, as you know, just ice, rest are probably the two biggest things. But at the same time, I ended up going to the doctor, going to the PT. They kind of recommended some exercises. So what's funny is when you get an injury that's, you know, in an actual spot, they don't give you workouts or exercises to strengthen that similar spot. They actually give you exercises to strengthen the muscles around the spot.
Right.
So I was given like, you know, take a tennis ball, squeeze it a couple of times, work on kind of finger strength, and I guess moving your fingers in different positions. Also doing a couple of those kind of those grip, I guess, you know, weight training ones, and then strengthening more the forearm, trying to do some exercise to strengthen this and kind of take the tension off the wrist itself. So doing that, and then trying to stay off of it as much as possible, kind of made a good combo of, you know, healthy recovery and at the same time good rest. So.
Did you tell the doctor that I want to be on the court as soon as possible?
No, I've had some, well, for one, I'm not as, you know, young and springy. I mean, granted, I'm only 26, but, you know, when you're like 14, 15, your body can just recover just like that. But now these days it takes a lot longer. So I'm not really in a huge rush to get back on the court, because I know that if you do get on the court sooner than expected, that could also cause long-term injuries. And obviously you want to be as healthy as possible for as long as you possibly can. So, no, I just told him that everything's hurting, and granted, I wasn't expecting 8 weeks, which wasn't the greatest answer in the world, but I mean, it's you know, worth the investment of taking days off from the court and taking days off from the gym just to make sure you're healthy and back to 100%. So I think it paid off to now, because now it's not hurting so bad, which is great.
Did you ever wear a brace?
I was actually in a wrist sling for all 8 weeks. So they had a hard kind of like a cast you can buy on Amazon, and made sure they had the splint in it, and I'd have to wear that for at least 4 or 5 hours a day, and then I'd have to do the exercises on top of it, and then ice it, and then actually sleep in that thing for the first 4 weeks. So I was pretty strict with all of that, and then finally after 4 weeks, the doc said, "How's it feeling?" Did a couple more tests, and I can actually bend my wrist back and forth and strengthen it up, and luckily I didn't need the support anymore on the wrist, and took it off, and then just did the whole rest and repeat. So
got it.
Yeah.
So I spoke to a doctor about this, because you know, we have our patient here that this question came from, her father actually, and the doctor actually said rest is probably the most important, but if you really want to be on the court, there are ways. Put on a brace, but don't overdo it every day. The brace is going to help a little bit, but you can't count on it to heal you. Make sure you listen to your doctor as to how much you should play and how much you strain it. The one thing though, Coach Jerod's injury was here. our patience is down here. So my guess is yours has to do with like this kind of a motion up, because you have so much, you impart so much spin on it. Our patience is probably from doing this and then hitting it a little late, therefore causing a lot of strain down here, which is the most common. This is the most common, and yours is the second most common. So rest and loose grip, hit in front of you, see the doc, and listen to what they say. Advil, temporary fix, guys. You know, you give up not feeling pain here for probably, giving up your kidneys or something. You know what I'm saying? So it ain't worth it. I know people that take literally, how many pills were you popping a day?
Each match at least 4.
Yeah.
Which is not great. Yeah. So,
yeah. I know people are taking 8 to 12.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I took 4 more after the match.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I was maxing out whatever I was allowed to read on the freaking label. So,
yeah. I hope you're not a big drinker now.
No. Well, no. Luckily, no.
All right. So I hope that helped you out. Thank you for the question. Coach Jerod, thank you for sharing your experiences. Wrist problems, no fun, especially for a tennis player, guys. All right. Coach Jerod, where can we find you?
You guys find me on Instagram at ModTennis.
Guys, thank you for watching Tennis Spin, where we put our spin on your tennis. Hey guys, do you need a tennis buddy? Want some more tennis friends? Have you guys considered Player Court? You can find over 27,000 players out there, coaches and playing partners. That's playercourt.com/tennis spin.